Welcome to our presentation, Domestic and International Perspectives on Implementing Alternatives to Finance Lifelong Education. I'm Abby Helsinger, and I'm recording this presentation that was originally delivered as a roundtable discussion at the 2021 Adult Education in Global Times International Research Conference. Additional authors include Natasia Hicks, Phyllis Cummins, and Takashi Yamashita. We'll share some information on access to and participation in adult education and training, and then share some examples of alternative models for funding AET, specifically individual savings accounts and training vouchers, across the comparison countries, which include Canada, Sweden, the UK, and the US. We'll wrap up the slides by sharing a summary and implications. We wanted to begin by highlighting why access to adult education and training, including financing, is so important. AET is key for all adults to enrich their quality of life in contemporary societies. It's also linked to more active participation in social, cultural, and political activities. In fact, our team is doing a final round of edits for a manuscript on the relationship between AET and social trust using data from the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, or PIAC. AET is necessary to prevent skill obsolescence due to the technological advancement. We gave a presentation at the National Council for Workforce Education's virtual conference last fall on this topic, and an administrator from a community college was a co-presenter. He spoke about how they are developing new programs in collaboration with their local employers to develop the skills that are needed due to technological advancement. Finally, it's critical to ensure the workforce has the skills to meet the needs of jobs in high demand. In another project our team is working on, we've been interviewing administrators at technical centers, which are sub-baccalaureate post-secondary institutions. They are sharing how they work with local employers to understand exactly what skills are needed in high-demand jobs so they can tailor their programs to ensure students gain these skills. Although access to AET is critical, unfortunately, it's not equitable, and those most in need of lifelong learning opportunities often have the least access. For example, adults with low literacy skills and low levels of education participate in AET at lower rates than those with high literacy skills and higher levels of education. Also, AET opportunities are more often available to those who have more prestigious occupations and higher income. We've included a couple of figures to help us highlight this. The data in this figure and the next come from the 2012-2014 PIAC data. Again, PIAC is the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies. In this first figure, we see participation in adult education and training by literacy level for ages 25 to 65. Based on the focus on lifelong learning in the Nordic countries, it's not surprising that Sweden has the highest participation for both low-skilled and medium and high-skilled adults. And as you can see across the board, medium and high-skilled adults have higher participation than low-skilled. As a note, PIAC divides literacy into 5 levels: below level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. For this figure, we combine below level 1 and level 1 and called that low-skilled, and we combine levels 2 through 4 and called that medium and high-skilled. As a second note, PIAC data are only included for England and do not include all of the UK. In this figure, we're looking at participation in AET by education level, again for ages 25 to 65. Similar to the last slide, we can see across all countries, Sweden has the highest participation rates for all 3 education levels, which we made less than a high school degree in teal, a high school degree and including some college, which you'll see in red, and a bachelor's degree or higher in yellow. For all countries, we see that participation increases as education level increases. So what are the barriers to participation in AET? Our team likes to look at crosses barriers to participation in adult learning activities, which separate barriers into 3 categories: situational barriers, institutional barriers, and dispositional barriers. Along with the lack of transportation and job and home responsibilities, cost of education, our focus for this presentation, is a situational barrier. It's helpful to understand the other 2 categories as well. Institutional barriers include difficult program enrollment processes, inflexible course schedules, and the time it takes to complete a program. And dispositional barriers, often considered the hardest to overcome, include prior negative experiences with education, and a lack of self-confidence, among others. Since we're gerontologists, we like to also mention that having feelings of being too old to go back to school is considered a dispositional barrier. Looking specifically at the cost of education, we know alternatives to funding are needed because AET opportunities for adults are most often provided by employers, which poses great challenges for unemployed and underemployed workers. And even when opportunities are offered, low-skilled workers are least likely to take advantage of those opportunities. Also, even in countries where post-secondary education is often subsidized, adult learners do not have the same opportunities. We heard from our key informants that in some cases, certain funding schemes are only available to a certain age, be it 45 or 65. Finally, specifically in the US, recent federal policy changes have shifted responsibility for funding adult education to the individual. We found examples of individual savings accounts in all 4 comparison countries, and this slide briefly compares them. Canada had a demonstration project called LearnSave. It required a participant contribution and included a government match up to $1,000. The program targeted the low-income population, but higher-income adults ended up participating more than the target population, so the program was terminated. The low participation by low-income adults was likely due to the matching requirement, which can be difficult for low-income adults. Sweden's program targeted low-skilled adults with a plan to place funds in a tax-deferred savings account. However, based on the experience of other countries, Sweden didn't implement the ISA due to concerns about reaching the target population. Employers and employees contributed in the UK version and targeted adults 19 and over, but this program was terminated due to widespread provider fraud, which has also led to low quality programs. Again, we heard from our key informants that when this initiative was started, there was an onset of providers, for-profit providers, and they were only really interested in getting the initial funds from their participants and didn't support them through program completion. And even when participants completed programs, their certification or credential wasn't as valuable to employers because the institutions weren't well recognized. Similar to the UK, employers and employees contributed in the US's version, also a demonstration project which targeted low income and other disadvantaged groups. Although the project showed positive outcomes, the program was never fully implemented because legislation supporting the program was not enacted. And this really calls back to the previous slide, indicating that responsibility for funding adult education has shifted to the individual. We also wanted to briefly mention training voucher schemes, which are currently active in the US. These programs are government funded and target low income, underemployed, and unemployed workers. Funding levels vary depending on available funds, but generally range from $5,000 to $10,000, depending on the type and length of training. Just to provide a brief summary, we wanted to share that to be successful reaching adults most in need of skill upgrade, financing models need to provide adequate funds for meaningful skill upgrades, have well-structured information sources that are easily navigated by the target population, and include policies to screen educational providers for program quality. Thanks for attending our presentation, and we want to acknowledge our funder, the Institute of Education Sciences, U.S. Department of Education.